Water is branded and marketed as a healthy product, yet Liquid Death turns it upside down and cuts off its head with a chainsaw. What just happened to bottled water branding? Here to tell the grisly story is Andy Pearson. Now, Andy is the VP of Creative at Liquid Death. His job is driving the brand's viral video content, the weekly merch drops, experiential events, and all those silly posts that show up in your feed every day. In his tenure, Liquid Death has infused Tony Hawk's blood into skateboards, punked the Super Bowl with kids getting crazy hydrated, collabed with Martha Stewart to sell severed hand candles, and invited internet trolls to a blind tase test, not taste test, tase test, and so much more. Previously, Andy spent about 13 years as a writer and creative director working on brands like Taco Bell, Volkswagen, Pizza Hut, Microsoft, Old Navy, and more at top ad agencies like CPV, UHLA, and others. I can't wait to dive into this interview with you, but first, I want to make sure that everybody knows that I've got Frank Beard with me today. Everybody knows this guy in the convenience store world. He's a playa. So, thank you so much, Andy, for joining us.
Oh, my pleasure.
So, by the way, your beard and your mustache and stuff on your LinkedIn profile was like, what the heck is that? Tell me what that was about.
The half beard, half
Half
everything.
beard.
I mean, I don't know. I just like to kind of constantly be changing my hair and my facial hair and just keep kind of everyone on their toes, and it all grows back. So when I'd grown out like a big Rasputin beard and I was going to take it off, and I figured, well, why waste the opportunity to do something stupid with it? So I just shaved off one side and took a picture of it, and now it's yeah, everyone that hits me up loves it. I've got a lot of mileage out of a really, split second dumb decision, but that's
Yeah.
probably most of my career.
How
Can be
often do
summed up that
people
way.
say, how often do people say, why waste the opportunity to do something stupid? Love it. Love it.
Yeah,
Hey, give us I gave you a little intro, but can you kind of take
yeah.
us on like your career's journey? Because I want to dive right into the brand journey for Liquid Death. But tell me about your journey, because obviously you're a highly creative dude.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean my journey is how much time we got. I mean I guess like it's kind of funny. I'm actually gonna go way back for a second.
Yeah,
I
dude.
remember in sixth grade, in middle school we had this like language arts class, and the teacher did, and I grew up in outside of Atlanta, and we had this kind of sweet but wacky uh teacher, and she teaches these like random units on, remember we did one on like taxes, we did one on everything other than language arts, and one was like about the evils of advertising. And I remember that I remember at one point she was having us look for like scald airbrushed in like Chivas like liquor ads and stuff, like in the ice cubes. And I just remember being like, this is cool. I was like, I don't think this is what we're supposed to be learning. And it's hilarious that someone is so obsessed and upset about this. And I just tucked that away. And then fast forward, and eventually got interested in this idea of advertising, but in the way, sort of in the idea that like anything can be an ad or a compelling idea. I studied it in undergrad, and my intro like advertising 101 class, there was I remember the professor talked about for A1 steak sauce, they added 3 words to the label of it, and sales shot up like 25%. And the 3 words were refrigerate after opening. And the whole thing was A1 is totally shelf-stable. It doesn't need to be refrigerated. But they had research that basically for every one time you open your pantry door, which is where it was normally kept, you open your refrigerator door about 10 times. And so just by way of having it in the fridge, people are seeing it more often, people are using it, it helped, with sales. And I kind of remember I remember that, and it again stuck with me as this idea that, ideas are powerful, ads are not necessarily. And I think and so I think that's what I've been interested in my career, is making compelling ideas. And sometimes they look like ads, sometimes they don't. I think Liquid Death is, in a lot of ways, I can't take any credit for the spark and creation of it at all. But I think Liquid Death is like the ultimate way that's played out, right? It's almost more of an idea that we're always playing with and toying with in culture and in CPG and in merch and across all these different media. We're playing with this idea that's sort of bigger than just like a brand or an ad or anything like that.
Yeah, you're the thing that Frank and I got excited about is in the industry that we spend a lot of our time in that convenience store industry, there are so many things that are the same.
Yeah.
Gas is pretty much gas. And no matter what convenience store you go to, they sell the same Cokes, they sell the same freaking hot dogs and nachos. Everything is so similar. And
Yeah.
what they end up doing is doing this kind of price promotion kind of a thing, and they all become homogenous. And
Hmm.
what really interested me is how the Liquid Death brand basically stopped marketing it as a typical water. This
Hmm.
this wasn't about the water as much as it was about this this experience or this personality. So
Hmm.
could you kind of lead us through like the history of like what the history of Liquid Death to be? Was it always about the macabre, or what did they start with going like, hey, we want to compete with Fiji and stuff like that? Well, can you take us through that history?
Yeah, I think so. There's kind of a number of pieces. I mean, the sort of spark of the idea came when our founder Mike Sario was he was actually backstage at the Warp Tour and saw a lot of guys back there that were drinking Monster Tour water, which they're actually interestingly now marketing more widely. But basically, tour water looks exactly like a Monster, but it's literally just water. And so basically what you'd have is you'd have bands on stage slamming what looks like Monster Energy when it's just water. And it it's very small. It's like tour water. Um, and I think he was just like, man, what a kind of a deceptive, weird marketing ploy to get people to drink more energy drinks when they're just drinking water, right? And so that was kind of the spark of like, well, what if we just used interesting tactics like that, or what if we turned that and we just used great marketing to actually promote things that were healthy instead, right? And so that was kind of the spark of it. It was about putting water in a can, making the most healthy thing in the world feel like the least healthy thing in the world, right? And so it started by, let's put in an aluminum beer can, a tall boy, and I think from that, it was like, well, what can we, by the name and the design, almost ensure that if you see it sitting on a shelf, you have to pick it up. To go to your point about like promotions and stuff like that, right? That's, someone sees a promotion, they're like, oh, okay, I'll give it a try. I think the way I've actually come to understand it, I think, is that Liquid Death is perhaps one of the first like truly viral products. The product itself is intended to be viral because, as a startup, you literally have $0. So what can you ensure that when it's sitting on a shelf, it's going to cause some sort of action or interaction? Um, and so that's kind of where the name Liquid Death came from. That's where the design came from, and it all kind of sprawled out of there. And then I think also another part of that it uncovered was this question of why no one puts water in aluminum cans. Why is it always plastic bottles? And from as they dove into that question, it was essentially marketing. It was that since the beginning of time, to your point about they're all the same. Bottled water has been marketed as this idea of purity, and that you have to, it's from these pure mountain springs or wherever they come from, or sometimes it's just tap, but you have to like see it, right? You have to literally
Yeah.
see it in and people, if you talked about purity but you can't see it, people wouldn't believe it. Which is hilarious because like you think of all the horrible stuff that's inside inside of a lot of cans that we don't see, and we're just like, yeah,
Yeah.
that seems fine to put in my body, right? um but that sort of thing unlocked this whole idea of, well, what if we could market something that was actually healthy, and then on top of that was also a much more sustainable choice, using infinitely recyclable aluminum cans,
Yeah.
because it really is, it's sort of like, the way I always talk about it is like, think of that marketing strategy to market plastic bottles, um, and then spin out like all of the plastic waste that has been generated by essentially just a marketing strategy over decades and decades, the millions and millions of tons that's in oceans and landfills and everywhere, because no one's bothered to question that. And
Yeah.
so that was sort of where our death to plastic idea came into play as well. And I think in general, like, we also donate part of our profits to kill plastic pollution through NGOs. But I think all these things come from this idea that no one had bothered to stop for a moment and think critically about what's in front of us and actually
Yeah.
try something totally different for a change.
You know what's weird is that the other water bottles or the water brands, they're trying to promote a healthy lifestyle,
Right.
yet they're using plastic,
Right.
right? And here Liquid Death is saying, we're trying to promote a killer, literally, lifestyle,
Yeah.
and we're doing it in the healthiest way possible, in the most sustainable way possible. I just
Yeah.
love how there's this contrast and this unexpected brand that you guys have forged.
Yeah. And part of it is, it's poking all that stuff in the eye a lot, right? Like all the marketing we do, it's all satire, it's all humor. Um, because also everything takes itself too freaking seriously, and we might as well like laugh and have fun with it. And so, leave that to all the brands that are, super self-important and think that they're doing whatever they're doing. We're gonna, we want to have fun. We want to, essentially, well, the way I heard it put really nicely the other day was like, evil liquid death is an evil plan to make the world healthier and more sustainable. And I really like that. I think that's a really nice, succinct way that we like to think about what we're doing.
Yeah. Tell me, you've been in the creative business for a long time, not just in Liquid Death, but in other
Yeah.
in agencies and stuff. You mentioned how important it is to have something that's very distinctively creative. And like when you open up a fridge door, I'm gonna do some trial. I'm not gonna look for
Hmm.
the price point. I want to look for something that's gonna be creatively engaging to me. Talk a
Hmm.
little bit about the role that creativity plays in marketing.
Well, I mean, do you mean from like a product standpoint or like
Yeah, from product.
yeah, I mean, the it's all about, there's sort of two things, right? There's the actual on the shelf, right? Great design that's going to jump out and grab you. And then there's also the idea of, branding in and of itself. And I think the way that Mike always likes to talk about it, which I think is great, is, a t-shirt can be the same. A t-shirt is essentially a t-shirt. It can be a Gucci t-shirt, or it can be a t-shirt you buy at Target, and it can cost $500, or it can cost $15, and it's literally pretty much the same material. It's pretty much the same form factor. It's just by infusing it with, a brand, that it suddenly carries so much more weight. And so I think, from our standpoint, we're I like to think of what we are, yes, we are a water company, but I do think that we're also an entertainment machine in a lot of ways.
Mhm.
And part of our product is the brand in and of itself. And we also we do a massive merch business as well. We launched, um, 116 products last year alone, just DDC on our site, to consumers. So it's all in service of building something bigger. But again, the water itself is entertainment. Like the thing if you look at the side of the can, there's this hilarious story written down the side of the can. When you're walking around with it, people maybe think you're walking around with a beer. It's a really it's an interactive brand in that way where you're sort of inviting in this playful nature with us. So it, yes, we do. It is water, but I don't know. I think it's something much higher level than that we're kind of creating through everything we're doing, right?
Yeah.
You
Haven't
have, yeah,
haven't you
go ahead, Frank.
haven't you guys had situations where parents, see their kid with a can of liquid death and they're like, "Oh my God, you've got a beer. Where'd you get that?" That's so funny to me on so many
It,
levels.
it's actually it's less the parents, because usually the parents know what it is, right? Most parents are buying what's in the home. It's usually will be school administrators and teachers. We get a lot of there'll be social posts, or we'll get emails that their kid they had to pour it out, or they got sent to the principals or whatever. And usually the parents find it hilarious. There have been times where it was like there was one where a kid was telling the teacher, like, no, seriously, it's just water. And then he like points to it, and they didn't believe them that it was water. And then they tasted it and they still didn't believe that it was water. Um, and it's like it's literally water. But then the flip side of that is that we get, not even flip side, but parents love us because we're getting kids to drink water more often. We get a lot of emails from parents that say things to the effect of, "Hey, my kid was addicted to energy drinks, and now we got them to switch, and now they're drinking water instead of putting all these energy drinks in their bodies." So, again, at the end of the day, we do all kinds of crazy, weird funny things, but it's a positive message across the board. It's all about giving people healthier choices, whether that's at parties, whether that's kids, whatever that is.
I mean, that's fascinating. I look back to when I was a kid. I grew up in the time when Surge was a big deal, and I'll be honest, I don't know how I'm still alive here. The amount of sugar and caffeine I consumed playing Nintendo 64. So, yeah, I can see why parents would rather make the switch here.
There was someone wrote a LinkedIn post the other day that I was actually literally trying to find it yesterday. I couldn't find it, but it was something to the effect of, it was like when I grew up, the coolest brands on the planet were like Surge and Mountain Dew and candy. And even in advertising, like the brands you always want to work on are like Skittles and Snickers and all these really unhealthy brands or beer brands or whatever. And the post was like, how cool is it that kids today are growing up in one of the coolest brands that there is a water brand, right?
Yeah.
And
I love that.
I don't know. There's a lot that we do, but sometimes when I sit back and think about that, that's a really kind of humbling thought in a lot of ways.
Here's the thing. Okay, I think great brands are able to filter every little touch point, every opportunity through their brand lens. I mean, just on the bottom it says "Murder Your Thirst." Then in the romance copy on the back, once cracked open, no thirst is safe from liquid death. After ritually dismembering its thirst victims, this brutal can of water used the severed body parts of dead thirsts to build itself a flesh suit. I mean, I'm telling you, like, how do you make sure that all the ideas you come up with, because you have a team, or is it just you?
No,
it's be a team, right?
No, it's not just me. We have a really small team. Again, Mike himself is a former advertising creative himself. A lot of this stuff came out of his own brain and his vision as the brand was forming. We collaborate with with people that don't necessarily have a background in marketing, or at least in the traditional sense. So, people that might be writers or creators of shows, or they might have, be the singer of a punk band or whatever. Like we pull in a lot of people and I think Liquid Death is sort of a platform for a lot of ideas from people that think that like to turn stuff over and examine it. I was thinking about this the other day. It's like the that kind of like punk mentality it finds a home here because we're doing it all ourselves, right? We're starting by tearing down everything that has been around and building it back up in a way that is both a middle finger to things and also we think is smarter and more creative and more interesting, and we're doing it all ourselves. And so that's the real mentality that we have behind the brand, and we find we find people that feel the same way essentially.
Do you have any guidelines that help people who work on the brand to make sure that the voice is consistent, that it is as rich in the macabre as you want it to be? Or is that something you guys have to drive constantly to death it up more?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I would say the funny thing is I've said this before, like we don't have a brand book. If most brands will be like, here's 120 pages that you need to know. We talk like this, but we don't talk like this, and we would never do this, all that stuff. When I very first started, I kind of was trying to put something like that together just for my own help. And I realized quickly it was a total fool's errand because there's so many things to understand about it. And as soon as you start putting all that stuff down on paper, it becomes inert and it doesn't live. And I think like having this brand book ended up being like a rule book for people and ends up shutting a lot of stuff down. And we certainly have a ton of guidelines, and we have a ton of things we will and won't do and that sort of thing, but it's so nuanced, it's really difficult to express in any meaningful way. I think the thing that I've likened it to is I like to think of Liquid Death less of a brand and more of a character. So I'm in the same way, my example I always give, it's like, imagine it's Walter White and you're writing for Breaking Bad. That's a difficult, nuanced character with a lot of stuff, a lot of history, a lot of things bopping around. It's really hard to kind of describe that. But if you're sitting in a writer's room and you're writing for that character, you can throw him in any situation and be like, Walter White gets a root canal. And then you're like, man, I can riff that episode immediately. I know exactly what's going to happen. And this is, he's going to react like this and this is going to happen and whatever. So it's the same way where you have to kind of internalize what we're doing and the brand and all this stuff. And then when we're trying to, whether that's writing an email for a merch launch or a social post or some big crazy video we're making, whatever, there's usually kind of a right answer for us versus like wandering around in like a creative wilderness trying to find the right idea and having it like descend from the heavens. There usually you're like, yeah, we would do this. Liquid Death, the character would do this thing. And so it's hard to work with people on the outside because I've worked on it, day in and day out, and it took me months and months to really like fully get it. You kind of have to get it by doing. And we put out so much stuff in the world that we kind of are constantly writing this character by just putting more stuff out all the time.
Have you had any ideas or concepts that just didn't make it, that just weren't quite grisly enough or?
Yeah, I mean, I would say we've had stuff where, well, I'll say we have a pretty good batting average. And
Okay.
it's not about making it grisly. It's about humor, right? So
Yeah.
what's the funniest way to do something? And we use horror or metal or whatever as humor, and it because it's funny to do that, not because we're trying to be hard. Right. But we've had stuff that we've killed because we felt, we kind of looked at it and we're like, either this goes too far or this isn't our thing to comment on. So again, we have it's all kind of gut checked and nuanced, but we're always calculating and making sure that we're right in that little exact space where we need to be. Because if it's too far in either one direction, it's either not funny or it goes too far.
Yeah, but everything has to be super, super funny. Like
Yeah.
this brand matrix of yours has to be on the crux of hilarious and deathly and macabre, right? It has to be obviously funny, and it
Yeah.
have to do with death or dismemberment or something.
Yeah. Well, I don't think it's always like death and dismemberment. I think it's like, again, it's like hilarious. And we've carved out this niche where it can be, um, like we did a workout video with Bert Kreischer, hydrating with liquid death the whole time, where he's basically in a Speedo. And it's like a 10-minute workout video that we sold on VHS. And there's nothing like deadly about that. It was just, we were upholding him as like the virtue of of the joke was like everyone wants to achieve their Burt bod, and he was going to show you how to do it. And one of his secrets is liquid death, but he's also hammering chicken wings and doing like marg lifts and stuff like that. There's nothing like grisly or deadly about it. It's just absurd, right? And so it's all part of the satire, and it can express itself in a bunch of different ways.
Awesome.
Something I thought was really fascinating. I was listening to I think it was a podcast with your founder, and it had come up that, so you guys had done this ad with like a 30-minute YouTube video, and it was one where people would put like a koozie on their head that had cans on it because it's supposed to like chill their head so zombies can't get their warm brains, basically. Totally silly and over the top. But what stuck out to me is they said 6% of the people watched that ad and didn't skip it, because how YouTube gives you 5 seconds and you can skip the ad. I got to be honest, I couldn't remember anything interesting I've ever seen probably on YouTube ads. Like people just click right through that, you're interrupting someone's watching, but the fact that 6% of people watch this whole thing, that's mind blowing to me. And kind of comes back to this idea. I think one of you guys had said that you see yourselves as more of an entertainment company with a water brand. And I just think that's fascinating.
Yeah. Yeah. Because look, like there's this old Howard Gossage quote. Howard Gossage is like this brilliant ad dude from San Francisco back in like the 60s, and he was way ahead of his time. And he has this quote about like people look at, I'm going to butcher this slightly, but it's people look at what interests them, and sometimes it's an ad, right? But like the most part of the time, people don't want to see ads. They're served up, like you're saying, they're interrupting you. I certainly hate advertising. That's part of this is like, why don't we just make stuff that people actually want to see, which is perhaps the least eureka moment ever. It's like, what if we just made stuff that we didn't have to force people to see, but they actually just wanted to see? And that's, again, kind of the whole premise is make entertainment and don't worry about making ads.
In a way, though, what's really interesting about this, and Ernie and I were talking about this earlier, but I feel like with a lot of the increase in marketing tech that's come out, the ability to, personalize or push notifications based off purchase history, all of these different things that people really have right now, there's so much focus on the method, but not on the creative side of things. And, I'll listen to retailers, for example, where they're raving about their new marketing tech stack. And I'm like, hey, I get those text messages. I already turned off your push notifications on your app because you're harassing me while I'm watching TV about stuff I don't want or need right now. Nothing's engaging. It's all just like deals, discounts. And, but then I look back and I'm like, my wife and I just sat and watched an hour of 1990s ads on YouTube. And you got all these, all the jingles we remember. You got the Bagel Bites jingle. I'm sure each of you can recall that word for word. It was blasted over TV entirely too much, and it's great. But I don't know. There's something kind of fun about that. And in a way, I like what you guys are doing because it seems like it has that same kind of vibe where it's like, hey, we totally want you to buy our water, but there's no reason that we can't put a smile on your face while we're telling you about it.
And it's about advertainment that they basically kind of like reinforced the idea that this is an advertainment. This is not about an ad to get you to convince you to buy something. It's about like, we want to involve you into our brand community and have fun with it. you're gonna, if you like that and you like us, you're gonna buy our stuff, and you're not gonna wait until it's 50 cents off.
Right.
And
Yeah.
and
I mean, I love that you're talking about technology because, I think we want to, we certainly want to be, the most technologically, advanced marketers we can, but humor is the oldest technology in the world. Like, we forget that a lot of times. That gets left behind. And I think, again, it's like, it's not rocket science what we're doing. We're just the only ones that have remembered to do it. We just launched something in January called horoscopes, to your point about, simple technologies. And horoscopes is literally, you get a monthly horoscope of like the horrible things that are going to happen to you that month based on your sign. And all you have to do is, text a short code to our number, and we got massive signups off of it. And people, every time we launch a new one every month, more and more people sign up, and it's a great way. There's no anything else that we're doing there. We're just literally giving people entertainment, and then they're like, yes, please take my phone number. And obviously that lets us do other things later on, but for now it's just people wanting to get entertained from us, and that's the only focus of what we're doing with that thing.
What's been I've got, this is my last question, and Frank, if you might have another one, but my last question, like, has been the most fun, the most exciting marketing program or campaign you've put together for these guys?
Oh man, I don't I don't know. There's so many that they're all so different. I mean, the Super Bowl one was super fun when I actually like hate big budget advertising. I always have. I think it's like super wasteful and needless. But I think like we had a real concept to make what looked like a beer ad and put it on the Super Bowl, except it was starring kids, and that was really fun just to see that roll out because it was like split half and a half hate and love on that thing, which we expected and was awesome to see that like happen in real time. So that was really fun to kind of see that in the world. Um, I think one that we never talk about, but I always love just the simplicity of it is when I first started, there was this guy on TikTok that was slamming a can of liquid death every day for a year. And it was coming up that was literally his entire feed. That's all it was. And in like 10 seconds or something. And it was coming up on the anniversary. And we were like, what are we going to do for this dude? And very last minute, I was like, well, all these people get liquid death tattoos. What if liquid death got a tattoo of this guy instead? And we went to Mike and we was like, hey, would you just get a tattoo of this random fan's face somewhere on your body and we'll make a video about it? He was like, sure. And so within, 2 days, he's like, at the shop getting this random guy's face tattooed on his body. We shot a super simple video. We put it out there, and it was just a good example because it was one of those things where I was like, no other CEO on the planet would be like, sure, that sounds like a good idea. And it felt like something that only we could do, and we did it super quickly without overthinking and overproducing it. And yeah, and it's I think a good example of the way that we like to treat our fans and feel like it's this interactive back and forth that we're always playing with people. So I like that one, but I mean, we've done so many. We've been able to do so many crazy things over the last, my time here that it's hard to pick any one really.
Well, you've made, like you said, your batting average is pretty stellar. You've got like, I can't wait to see what the next thing you're going to come up with. So because it's a teaser trailer. Then each campaign you do is promising that there's going to be a good one coming up. So you're watching for it instead of like Mike instead of what Frank was saying. Frank's going, look, I want to avoid all ads,
right?
And all of them. When you start subscribing to ads, you've got something going pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, totally. I mean, I'm interested to see what we do next. Like for for us, it's the same thing. We're like, what's the going to be the next thing? In a lot of ways, it's sort of like SNL. It's like you're tuning in because you're like, what are they going to do now? Right. So, and a lot of times, I imagine if you're writing for that show, you don't know what you're doing next week either. And so, it's kind of this constant wheel of like, let's up ourselves and surprise ourselves. Let's surprise people. Again, we're not trying to have a cohesive narrative or like look or anything like that. In a way, everything we want to do looks nothing like the last thing we did, right? Which is counterintuitive to every bit of branding you've ever heard in your entire career, right? But that by nature, by being a wild card is what our brand is, right? So then that becomes our actual brand in a sense. So yeah, I mean, we got wild stuff in the hopper right now. Just shot a couple things, and we're just editing a few things. Excited to get them out in the world, and working on new stuff coming out. Yeah, I'm excited to see what reaction to this stuff, and I'm excited to see what the next thing we're going to think of is.
Awesome. Awesome. Hey, Frank, you have any last questions?
Yeah, I just really got two to end with. One I was just kind of
Yeah.
curious about is, when you look back, and this could be through any decade, it doesn't just have to be now, but, what are some of your favorite ads that you've ever seen? Or ads or marketing efforts. I mean, I'll give you one of mine. I
Yeah.
think the 1990s McDonald's ads were incredible. I mean, they're to the point I've heard you guys make before. It seems like it's only the unhealthy brands that get to go big and have a good time with marketing. But I mean, I remember some of those word for word, what I saw around the holidays on TV, or the fact that they somehow convinced our schools to let them send their corporate mascot to talk to us for an hour at a pep assembly.
Right.
That was pretty clever, really. But when you look back, what really stands out to you? Like, what ads are some of your favorite?
Oh man. Um, again, I think it's like the idea is you look at like the truth work, the anti-smoking campaign that was from Crispin, where the place that I was lucky enough to work for a long time. It was before my time there, but I mean that work massively influential, and totally counterculture. The whole idea was like to throw a middle finger to the entire industry, right? And I think the interesting thing about that work was there had been anti-smoking campaigns for years and years and years, and no one cares. It's like your parents going like, "You shouldn't smoke; it's bad for you." No one wants to hear. No one pays attention to stuff like this is bad for you, right? But if the message is like, "Hey, you've been duped. You've been made a sucker by these big corporations that are getting rich off of you and making you look like an idiot," like suddenly that to a teenager or someone in their 20s is a massively powerful way to speak to them, right? And so the whole campaign was to flip it back and attack the corporations and big tobacco. So I love all that work strategically because what it was doing. And again, there's like shades of that. I think with us, it's like we've been all this like green work and sustainability, it all becomes the same color green in telling us we need to make more sustainable choices. But what if we just package water in aluminum tall boys instead and got in that way? So that stuff's great. I think like and then there's just I mean there's one of my favorite spots was this one. It was actually a Sprite commercial. It was like a riff off the old Sunny D spots, if you guys remember, like
Oh yeah.
and I got to work for the guy that wrote this too. It was like these kids coming in and they're like looking in the fridge um to see what they have, and the mom's there, and then suddenly like this like sun character hops off of the bottle of Sunny D, or this fake Sunny D, and is this cartoon character in the real world, and all the kids just stop and scream, and the mom runs and they're like, ah! And it's like running through the house chasing them around. and it was this whole like Sprite commercial for, obey your thirst, which is hilarious because all the Sprite work was like, don't listen to marketing or advertising, obey your thirst by drinking Sprite, which is, kind of like this crazy logic loop that I can't even begin to unwind just yet. But again, it was sort of the subversive idea of deconstructing advertising. And so I think a lot of that stuff always stuck with me.
That's fun. Yeah, and I think there's a lot of marketers and a lot of people working in branding, especially at some of the retailers, that I'm familiar with, where I think maybe they feel, as they get in, they feel a lot of pressure to just pray and spray high volume, and just send a lot of ads and not really put a lot of effort into creative, because I don't know if it's always valued sometimes by leadership. But what would your advice be for someone who's kind of getting started on the journey, maybe wants to do more on the creative side? How would you encourage them to articulate the value of going big and being very, very creative in how they talk to their customers?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think I think, look, like you can point to stuff, point to what we're doing. I think like we get a lot of people that are like that just kind of on the side tell me thank you because we're using you guys as examples internally or to our clients or whatever. Because I think again there's so much value that can be created by creativity versus just money, and there is a genuine dollar amount that we can put on the creativity that we do. Is the Liquid Death thing right for every brand? Absolutely not. Like it would be near impossible to replicate this for everybody. But I do think the idea that if you just stop and pause and think about things critically, there's a better way to do everything. There's a better way to not have to spend money forcing people to watch what you're doing, right? There's a better, to your point, Ernie, like you can use the little bottom of the can to have a funny message right there. There are so many touch points that marketers just totally blow past, and you're just doing the same thing over and over again because you don't stop to think about it. And I think that's, in a lot of ways, that's the grand thesis of everything at Liquid Death. It's like there's a better way to do something if you just stop for a moment and you examine it and you think about it. So that's what I would say. It's like, and if you can convince people, if you can convince people by showing them that it's a better experience, that's the tricky thing that's on you now to to convince people internally. But spend time iterating, spend time in the creative, making it funny to you, not in an advertising sense, but in like a real sense. I talk about that a lot too. It's like a lot of people are trying to make stuff that's like advertising funny. There's a lot of commercials. We're about to see Super Bowl's next, in a couple of days. We're going to see a lot of commercials that are advertising funny. It's very funny for a commercial, but is it genuinely like funny? There's not a lot of people that hold that as the standard. And that's really what we want to do is play with people that are just making entertainment, not making other ads.
Oh, beautiful work, man. Hey, I got to ask you real quick. What was your reaction to my drawing? I put that sketch up. I'm like, I wonder if I can get his attention if I drew a picture of him. What was your reaction?
I was like, damn, he's either a really good artist or he has access to Fiverr. Was that your own drawing or?
That's me, man. That's me.
Nice. Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah. That's great. No, that was great.
Awesome. I've been in the advertising business for a long time. I used to work for an ad agency in Salt Lake City. That's how I started. I kind of cut my teeth. I was a storyboard and concept artist.
Oh, wow.
And I studied illustration at school, but so I've always been in the advertising industry for years. Yeah. It wasn't until like about 15 years ago that I started working in the convenience store world. So when I see your stuff and I know the background of what advertising and marketing is like, and for you to have the liberty and to have a client, an owner that is not just tolerant, but expectant of pushing the envelope, like you, dude, you're lucky. You're lucky to have that, be fettered free.
Yeah, I mean, he pushes us a lot of times. It's, it's awesome. It's very liberating. I think it's very cathartic in a lot of ways on like a personal level, or when we bring people in, they're like, oh wait, we can make fun of our own careers that we've been developing for, you take all that baggage of all the terrible things you've been forced to make over the years, and you're like, let's turn around and spray it back at itself. It's a very cathartic, fun experience. And also, again, because we're not overthinking stuff. We're not, I think that's the other thing I see in just the marketing and especially advertising industry. It's just there's so much overthinking on everything, and it doesn't have to be that. It can just be fun. Again, going back, it's like fun. Humor is the oldest technology. We just have forgotten that it exists, and maybe we need to go back to that a little bit more.
Awesome. Well, you guys do a great job. Hey, everybody listening, if you haven't tried Liquid Death, you may already be dead. But if you are still alive and haven't tried it, you've got to go try it. I think more than anything, to be an ambassador for the different, ambassador for healthy, ambassador for change, because you basically vote by the things that you buy. And when you're buying Liquid Death, you're saying, screw the big corporations. Be true to the individuality, to go on your own. And that's what Liquid Death has done. They have flipped the water industry upside down, literally, by creating a brand and a voice and a personality that is completely unexpected. And I think we can use that. I appreciate you bringing that up, Andy, that Liquid Death can inspire other businesses and other industries to look at things differently. How can they be swim upstream, basically. Mm-hmm. Don't go with everybody else, because that's where everybody else is going and you'll never stand out. So what can you do that's different? So thanks so much, man. Thanks for inspiring us today, Andy.
Oh, thanks for having me.
You betcha. Hey, thanks, Frank, for joining us.
Hey, thanks. Yeah, this was fun.
Heck yeah.
Really enjoyed the chat.
Well, I look forward to the new stuff you do, Andy. Keep entertaining us with Liquid Death, all right?
Will do. Deal.
Awesome. See you later. All right.
Take care, guys. Thanks so much.
Bye-bye.